For most Americans, Memorial Day weekend is celebrated with vacations, time off from work, and the welcome of warmer weather through outdoor activities. There are less and less people every year who understand the significance of this day, and even fewer still that honor those early traditions. The origins of the holiday have dissipated into the modern-day barbecue it has become. I'll admit, I look forward to the extended weekend during this time of the year as a school teacher. However, this week we wanted to take a step away from all of that and focus on the origins of this day and what it truly stands for at its core. After the horrific nature of the Civil War, the U.S. government wanted to honor those fallen in battle. Memorial Day was originally called Decoration Day, named for the act of decorating the gravestones of soldiers who lost their lives in the Civil War with springtime flowers. Spring is a time of rebirth and renewal, and it signified eternal life for the sacrifices they made. Humans have been honoring their dead with offerings since ancient times. It is in our nature to mourn those lost to us, especially those who die in unnatural ways. We are left with the what-ifs of a life cut short due to violence. When 20-year-old Willard Lynn Clinch was filling out his draft card at the start of the Korean War, his fiancée knew what it could mean as she stood there powerless beside him. Today, we are going to talk about my great-uncle and his heroic actions that saved an entire company of men during the Korean War. Welcome to Who Are You? Curious Stories of Family Lore. I'm Wheatsy.
And I'm Sam Ivy.
And I don't know what episode number this is anymore. It's an episode.
Yeah, 30-something? 30 plus.
Yeah, it's over 30. And today it is, when you're listening to this, if you're listening to it on the day it comes out, it's Sunday, the day before Memorial Day. And we were going to air a different episode, but then started thinking about it, and I thought of my uncle, my great uncle, Bill. And I thought, you know what? I feel like maybe I've mentioned him. I don't know if I've mentioned him on the pod or if I've said it to you.
You've definitely said it to me
maybe
before.
Once. You remember him?
Mm-hmm. You've talked about him.
Okay.
I haven't heard any what this is about, but I remember you mentioning him before.
Yeah. Oh, and I thought so, because this is a cool. It's not cool. That's like a bad way to put it, but it's never cool when somebody dies fighting for their country, because obviously this is a Memorial Day episode, and we're highlighting Willard Lynn Clinch, and I'm going to get into everything about him. And Memorial Day is specifically about those who are killed in action, died fighting for their country, missing in action, bodies that are never recovered, those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And that's why it was originally called Decoration Day. So I thought it would be good to maybe just share. I gave quite a bit of the summary of the history of Memorial Day, but I have a few more specific details. Okay, so this is from the National Cemetery Administration.gov that talks about the origins of Memorial Day. And I wanted to share this quote. This quote hit me and made me think of my family and the people that I've lost, and that's what kind of got me thinking about Uncle Bill and his sacrifice. That nation which respects and honors its dead shall ever be respected and honored itself. And that was said by Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Edmund B. Whitman in 1868. And the idea of mourning or honoring your dead, that act of remembering those who have died, it feels like a familiar feeling, like that longing to remember those who have left us. And we all care about somebody, and we've all lost somebody. And there is something healing with giving offerings at a place of memoriam for that person. So, originally called Decoration Day, it was formalized by a Memorial Day order issued by Grand Army of the Republic Commander-in-Chief John A. Logan in 1868. So it was originally called Decoration Day immediately following the Civil War. And the Civil War was ended, I don't know when it started, but does it say here? I think 1860s. I don't know exactly. I remember reading it, 1860s. But so I think it was early 1860s. So the Civil War ends, and because how horrific the Civil War was, so like we need a day where we just pause and we just stop and we honor the dead from the Civil War. And we're going to call it Decoration Day. And that carries on for like 4 years. And then in 1868, it's declared Memorial Day because I don't even know why it was changed. But the decoration is literally for the act of putting flowers on the grave. And perhaps maybe because Memorial Day evolved into parades and other ways to honor, that it wasn't just about decorating the graves anymore. It was about ceremonies and other ways to memorialize. So Memorial Day allows various ways of celebration.
Well, you got to think about it too. Like, it could also be the breakdown of Decoration Day was just like for that instance, like it happened, so they needed something to call it, so they could have something to like mark the day. But as years passed, they realized that they were honoring those like traditions, those stories, those people. So, like you said, like it just got memorialized after like a certain point. So instead of it just being fresh and like it's Decoration Day, it's no, like this is our past history. It happened. We're memorializing it.
Yep. And the phrase "in memoriam" was common at gatherings that were like, if you're decorating the graves, there might be a group of you going out to decorate the graves, and there might be some sort of sign that says "in memoriam." Or if you're selling flowers, you might be selling flowers specifically to decorate graves, and you'd see "in memoriam." So that is also like another, maybe perhaps in memoriam, Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Really, the really specific start of Memorial Day, I think this is kind of cool because it's just a little fun fact. One of the earliest accounts of this practice happening on the day now known as Memorial Day was when there was a group of 3 women who had decorated the graves of fallen soldiers. Just that they just went out and did it, and other people saw them doing it, and it caught on. And that's one of the earliest accounts. Not saying they were the first, but potentially
cool,
Memorial Day. Yeah, Memorial Day was started by women honoring their fallen. So, what does that tell you about women?
Not to be like that, but a lot of things are started by women. So,
be like that. Be absolutely like that. Yeah. A lot of things are and have been started by women. Monopoly started by a woman. You wouldn't know that,
life
would you?
wouldn't be started without a
Look
woman.
it up. What's that?
A man's life would not be started without a woman. We create you. Therefore,
Literally.
Your life starts with us.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that men claim as well, besides just life itself.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which you would think would be enough, but it's not. It's not. Life itself providing that is not enough. So, we also made Memorial Day, supposedly. Another early account of the origins of Memorial Day was in Columbus, Georgia, whose city cemetery was just kind of in disarray, wasn't being taken care of. And so a ladies' memorial association formed for the sole purpose to improve that cemetery, which included a media campaign. So they were like, hey, we need to clean up the cemetery. And Secretary Mary Ann Williams published first like a letter on March 11th in a newspaper advocating to set apart a certain day to be observed and be handed down through time as a religious custom of the country to wreath the graves of our martyred dead with flowers. Their chosen date was April 26, 1866. That was what they wanted. However, the Mississippi city of Columbus, an ongoing source of historic confusion, held its event one day earlier than the Georgia Association planned. Thus, it claims to be the first actual Memorial Day because they were like, oh, you're going to do it then? We're going to do it here. We win. So, and that was run by men, I think.
Nah.
I don't know for sure, but it kind of...
I think not.
I'm going to look it up. Let's see. The Mississippi city of Columbus, an ongoing source of historic confusion. They seem problematic. I'll look them up. Okay, I don't want to be sued. I don't know anything about them. Maybe they're not problematic. All of these things stated here are opinions unless us thus prove otherwise through fact.
A link in there showing you fucking fact checks.
This is from cem.va.gov, this information.
Oh, shit.
I will source it. Yes, but some of it is opinionated little inserts here and there. But I can just probably in the 1860s guarantee that there was no female city electives,
especially
officials.
in Mississippi. Like being somebody who lived in Mississippi, and even when I lived there in early 2000s, it was still it still needed to evolve more. Coming with like, you know, having a black stepdad and stuff like that, like racism was still really big there, and like still with like that stigmatism on like, you know, women have their roles and have their place. Not saying it's like that now, so if any of our fans listening from Mississippi, please let us know otherwise. But at least when I lived there, my personal experience was thus. So I can assume that probably back in the day, less progressive times.
But back to the point of, so they claimed, oh, we did it a day sooner, so we're going to claim to be the first. The Mississippi program was later immortalized in a popular poem by Francis Miles Finch, The Blue and the Gray. I've never heard of that poem. And national reporting in contemporary terms went viral. So like, because they were a bigger organization, they were able to reach out to more newspapers and more disseminate more information than this smaller Ladies Memorial Association who was trying to do this. So they kind of like saw this idea. They're like, that's a great idea. And they had more resources and more ability to reach the masses. And they were like, we're doing this. And so they got recognition for it. And that is how that spread with that claim that they started it. So the April 25th through 26th, 1866 Memorial Day events honoring Confederate and Union dead in the South was a step towards reconciliation that reverberated nationwide, though it was predictably uncomfortable for some Northerners. So, I mean, this is the Civil War, and you have a country who's like broken apart, literally in half, and now the war is over. The North won, you know, and everybody is mourning the loss of somebody. And this is the thing, like, history repeats itself. If we end up fighting because we don't agree on things, at the end of the day, we're all going to end up hurt. All of us are going to lose. History's going to repeat itself. We don't want that. We don't want that. And generally just speaking. And so that's why it's important to remember and celebrate Memorial Day and observe and know the history of the day that we are celebrating, because it's like nobody got out of the Civil War without losing somebody. Because if you were over 18 and you were male, you were going to fight. You were fighting. And if you weren't fighting, your towns, your homes, they became the front lines. You had to move, you had to run, you had to hide. It was we can't even fathom what that must have been like, and the amount of people who died, to the point that the entire country was like, damn, we obliterated each other. We have to grieve this together, and we have to figure out a way to get past this so that we can heal and maintain and rebuild. We don't ever want it to get that bad again. We don't want to ever have to grieve and mourn that many of our dead. This is pre-World War I. This is pre-World War II. You know, and we already were trying to be like, oh crap. We gotta listen. We gotta try to fucking pay attention. So that's the origins of Memorial Day. And it was, you know, I think important to talk about that before we get into this story.
100%. Because a lot of people don't understand, like, yeah, they might understand, like, the basis of, like, Memorial Day, but, like, they just see it as, oh, cool, it's a holiday. Cool, I don't have to go to school that day. Oh, shit, I got off work. They don't realize, like, the magnitude and, like, the weight that day actually holds.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I didn't, as a kid, like,
Same.
We would go put flowers on the graves of our family members, like, for Memorial Day. That is something, like, my Uncle Jim, he would go Memorial Day and Labor Day, and my grandma when she was able. And that was a thing, my grandma, me, and my mom. It was something that was being carried down. So I find that really beautiful that the origins could be traced back to Pennsylvania trio of women putting flowers on graves. That just, like, brought me right back to being like, well, who is this in our family? Who is this in our family? And them telling me the stories of why we're putting flowers on these graves, what they stand for. And that brings me to my Uncle Bill and the stories that I grew up. And I'm going to get probably a little emotional talking about this, because this is somebody I've never met, and you'll see, and I'll talk about the Korean War, and how ingrained his memory has been in our family lore, our family stories, and the pride that our family has carried for the sacrifice that he made, though it does not and has not come without a gaping hole in our lives. Because I would have known him. I knew some of my great uncles, his brothers, my grandfather. This was my grandfather's brother. So I could have known him because he was the youngest. So let's talk about Willard Lynn Clinch, my great uncle Bill. He was born November 25th in 1928 to Maud and Marvin Clinch. Marvin Lynn Clinch, actually. So Willard Lynn was named after his dad. When he was in high school, when he was like 16, he joined the Army National Guard, and that was voluntary, or at 17. And that is separate than what comes later, I think. So he joined the Guard. He ended up in the 3rd Infantry Division, and he enlisted in Fort Dix, New Jersey. This is when he was in the Guard. And I was stationed at McGuire Air Force Base, which is combined. It's a Fort Dix McGuire combo when I was in the military, but I lived on Fort Dix in New Jersey. So to know that I lived there for a period of time while I served in the military, and he started his military journey there, you know, generations before me, years before me, decades before me, not generations, I meant decades before me. I just somehow find that just, like, hit me weird. I was like, oh, I didn't know that he was at Fort Dix. It would have been really, really crazy to have known that, because I used to walk that like, I lived in housing on Fort Dix with other roommates, because they had, like, singles housing, so you could, like, live there with other military members on base for really cheap. You didn't have to be married. And then there was married people housing on the other side. And so I used to walk. I just used to walk the base. And it just would have been crazy to know that my great uncle probably walked that base too, and how different it probably was. And
Oh yeah,
it just would have been a whole different experience to know that,
100%, dude. But like, I mean, yes, you still like cherish it and like love the memory, but like to be there when knowing that would have been more of an emotional tie to it, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was born, like, I think in Oneida. So all the records say Oneida, but it also says Madison. So, like, kind of out in the country, but Madison, Oneida County. So, kind of in the countryside from where the little town was that I grew up. So, this is like out in the hills kind of deal. So, um, it seems like he was in the guard, but wasn't like ever deployed or anything while he was in high school. And I don't know if that's just because there was the guard and there was no, like, he was just going to boot camp and going to training, but was still like maintaining a normal life because he was employed. I was looking through census records. When he was 20 years old, he was employed at Laban Grocers. So he like worked at a grocery store when he was 20. So he graduated high school. He did some guard stuff, but maintained a job as a grocer. And there are no records that he ever got out. But when you're in the guard, you can be activated. And so I was reading his draft card because he ended up getting drafted at 20 years old. And I just want to read some of the information on there because it's just wild that with some relatives, you can get this much information. And with other relatives, I can't even get their last names. It's just crazy. So he had light brown hair and blue eyes. He was 6 foot tall exactly, and he weighed 160 pounds on the day that he was weighed to enlist or to be drafted into the Korean War. He had a scar on his right thigh that was significant, and I looked and looked and looked and tried to find out what that scar was from, like what could have happened, but I don't know, and I may never know, and I just want to know. It's just such a weird thing. I'm like, what was that from?
Yeah,
You're 20
especially
years
if
old. What?
it's enough for the military to want to like note it on your fucking like what did it look like? What happened?
Yeah, yeah. So I was just like, what? Okay. So he was drafted at 20 years old. So he had to fill out his draft card. And I know this from family, this is word of mouth, this part, and I couldn't find her anywhere, and it makes me so sad. This is the part, oh my God. He had a fiance when he was 20. And they apparently had been, I'm thinking high school sweetheart. And she was with him when he was drafted. So that's why I mentioned her in the beginning, like standing there powerless beside him, because it's like he gets this letter in the mail that's like, you have been drafted to the Korean War. You're going. And you've been drafted to the 1st Cavalry Division. And he was in the 8th Cavalry. So he was a corporal for the 8th Cavalry, the 1st Cavalry Division. And some quick facts about this division during the Korean War. They spent 549 days in continuous combat at Pohang-dong, South Korea. His mother, Maud, was filling out an application for a military headstone in August, less than 6 months after he was killed in action. Because he ends up killed in action. And I say that about my grandma Maudie because it wasn't like he had already had a headstone. He'd already been buried when he was killed in action. He came back. This was her being like, I want my son honored. So this just shows that like his mother in her mourning after he died was like, I'm going to get you the honors. I'm going to memorialize you. Sorry. Just like the thought of losing. Also, sorry. He was the youngest, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So like this was her baby. This was her final son, and it's just like the thought of like her having to go and fill out that application for a military headstone is so gut-wrenching. And there are people right now that are getting phone calls of that their children, their grown children, women
Mm-hmm.
and men, are being killed right now in our country. And that is so heartbreaking. And so I just wanted to just bring that up because I read the application and you see her scribbled signature and you just know that in that moment her hands are shaking because she just wants her baby boy memorialized. And let's talk about what he did. Okay. And I just want to thank the KoreanWarProject.org for their amazing work in organizing records and history of people killed in action in the Korean War. If you have a family member who was killed in the Korean War, you can go on that website, you can type in their name, and you can find all of this information for free. And then you can read remembrance entries of people who knew them and their experiences. And I'm going to read you personal experiences of people who knew my great uncle Bill. And there's one of somebody who fought with him. So it's insane that we have this resource available. It's just crazy. All right. So now we're going to get into what he did and kind of what he received. So he was a corporal in the Army at the 8th Cavalry Regiment, and his decoration that he received is the Distinguished Service Cross. He was considered killed in action on February 12th, 1951. He was 22 years old, and the place was Hill 350 in Pabalmok, South Korea. Excuse me. And on this remembrance page on the Korean War Project remembrance page for him, there are these remembrance entries, so people can go in here and they can post. I have an entry on here from 2011 that is asking people to reach out to me if they know any information about him. And then after that entry is another entry. And this is from, I'm just going to say P. Shaughnessy. And if you click on it, he basically provided the Distinguished Service Cross citation for reference. And I think that is really, really cool. So this is exactly what his Distinguished Service Cross was given to him for. The President of the United States takes pride in presenting the Distinguished Service Cross posthumously to Willard L. Clinch, Corporal, U.S. Army, for extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy of the United Nations while serving with Company C, 1st Battalion, 8th Cavalry Regiment, which was infantry, 1st Cavalry Division. Corporal Clinch distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism in action against enemy aggressor forces in the vicinity of Palbulmak, Korea, on 12 February 1951. On that date, Company C was engaged in an assault against a well-fortified and camouflaged enemy force holding positions on Hill 350. As Corporal Clinch led his squad forward, the men were suddenly subjected to intense and accurate fire from hidden enemy snipers. As the men began to falter, he moved out towards the objective, shouting words of encouragement to his squad and urging them to follow. Inspired by his courage, the men renewed their assault and had moved to within 30 yards of the crest of the hill when they were met by a devastating volume of small arms and automatic weapons fire from the hostile replacements. This forced them to seek cover. With the enemy hurling grenades down the hill, the positions soon became untenable, and Corporal Clinch, realizing that his men faced annihilation, unhesitatingly charged forward across the fire-swept terrain. Upon reaching a point 10 yards from the enemy defense, he knelt and threw the grenades until he had succeeded in neutralizing the enemy resistance at that point. Then, while urging his men forward in the assault, he was hit and mortally wounded by sniper fire. He was 22 years old.
That is something like you see like in video games or you see like in war movies. Like you don't think of somebody actually running out there and being like, yeah, take it back. And then to be fucking just shot down at the end. Like, you survived throwing all those grenades, not blowing up a single part of your fucking body, just to get shot down.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice speech, man.
Yep. And had he not started throwing all of those grenades, all of those men would have died because he was throwing them back, which basically, like it said, neutralized the threat enough for his men to come forward. They ended up overtaking that.
Dude,
Like, they
you
ended
gotta
up
think, like,
living.
because this is your uncle, great uncle?
My great uncle, so my grandpa's brother.
Yeah, so your great uncle is now in so many different family stories, and is something like his name is passed down and lives on through them, because without him, those people that did survive, their families and their lineage and their heritage would not have been able to progress the way that it has. That's a wild thought to
Yeah.
think. Like, I don't know how many men he
Yeah.
saved, but think about like that. Think about all those men went home from this tragic event and were able to say, Willard, he, because of him. Like,
Yeah. Yep. And speaking of people being able to say that, this is an entry from 1999 by Maurice Ronaine, and the topic is, I knew him. And so, remember, he died in 1951 at 22 years old. This entry is from 1999, and October 13th, 1999. This entry says, Corporal Clinch was in our platoon. I was in a different squad, so I really didn't know him personally. However, on February 12th, 1951, we were trying to take Hill 350, I believe. We had almost gotten to the top and were pinned down and couldn't go any further. Corporal Clinch tried to get us to charge up the hill, and when doing that, he stood up and was hit and killed. I was wounded about 20 minutes later. We eventually took the hill successfully and carried him down later in the day. He certainly died a heroic death. I hope this information help explains what happened and why. So they
that's
went.
heavy.
They went and they did not leave him there.
And
They
that
did
shows
not.
their honor and like how much he
Oh,
meant to them.
this kid right here, 22 years old. Just insane. And the last entry I'm going to read, I'm not going to say this person's name. I don't even know if this person is still alive. All I'm going to say is this is one of his nephews. And I really think this is a great story, like a great entry. And it is here on KoreanWarProject.org. It's public information, so you could go and read it too. So I can just barely remember my uncle making funny faces at me. Grandma Clinch left me his Purple Heart and Distinguished Service Cross. Sometime in the early 1960s, the 1st Cavalry in South Korea named a unit camp after him, and U.S. Representative Alexander Perney arranged to have many photographs of the ceremony sent home. Uncle Bill is buried at Valley View Cemetery in Sherrill, New York, just outside Oneida, New York. Recently, in the city of Oneida, a group of his school friends got together and arranged to have a bronze plaque memorial placed on a large boulder in a small city park renamed Clinch Park. Every anniversary of his death, my mom has flowers placed in church in his memory. I am the oldest nephew and the only one to go into a combat zone. I served as a medic with the 101 101st Airborne in Vietnam from 1969 to 70, finished 8 years active, moved to South America for 18 plus years, and am now working as a manager with Walmart, living with my wife Patty in Erie, Pennsylvania. I have 2 children by my previous marriage and a granddaughter. So, back to the Clinch Park thing. When I was a kid, I remember this day. I remember how proud my family was. Sorry, I didn't think this was going to hit me like this. And I'm getting emotional because I'm looking at this picture. And these are all of his brothers. And I'll post this. It's my grandfather and his twin brother, my Uncle Warren, and my Uncle Ed. So it's not all of them, because where's Uncle Bud? Maybe Ed and Bud might be the same. Yeah. I'm pretty sure they had 5 boys. Yes, that's all of them. So that's all of his brothers. So they were all still alive then. None of them are alive anymore. So I'm going to read. Yeah. So I'm going to read this. This is from the, it looks like it might be the Oneida Daily Dispatch, but this was actually cut out and was left with these pictures I found. So, by Dale Seth. Yes, Dispatch staff writer. So we're going to give credit to Dale Seth. Oneida. It was the ceremony both solemn and joyous Saturday morning when the narrow strip of land along East Railroad Avenue, where the Oneida Block Party's gazebo stands. We don't have block parties anymore, but man, that's a memory. Oneida Block Parties as a kid. I never knew it was that was my uncle's park. Oh my gosh. Whoa. Anybody from Oneida knows those block parties, let me tell you. Holy cow. Anyways, whoa. About 25 members of the Clinch family, including his 4 surviving brothers, were on hand for the brief ceremony. Clinch was killed in action during the Korean War on February 12, 1951, at the age of 22, as he valiantly led a charge up an inconspicuous piece of territory known only as Hill Number 350, near Pabalmak, South Korea. He was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award given to U.S. service personnel for bravery above and beyond the call of duty. The City Parks and Recreation Department will now maintain the park. Clinch's brother Warren said the family moved to Oneida in 1932, and members of the family, including his brothers Edward, Marvin, and Olin, and their families, still live in the area. Warren Clinch, the former owner of the Oneida Heater, said he moved away to Ocala, Florida after he sold the business 15 years ago. Though he returns home regularly for visits, he said he was especially honored and proud to have been invited to the ceremony. Oneida has meant a lot to us, he said, not without emotion, speaking on behalf of the family. Thank you for this honor. We all appreciate it, the Clinch boys, our wives, our children, and our grandchildren. We're pleased that you have done this, he said. It's an honor we'll never forget. Joseph Carinci, commander of Oneida, American Legion Post number 169, said the people of Oneida should be proud of Clinch and the heroism he displayed in the last moments of his life he gave in the service to his country and to freedom around the world. I hope this is the start of the citizens of Oneida, he said, for the veterans of Oneida towards recognizing all of our people who have been killed in action. I have the feeling that they're here with us today, he said, to help us honor Corporal Willard Clinch. It's crazy how much you can love your ancestors and wish that things had been different for them. Because on top of his loss, I think back to his fiance. And my grandma told me the story of the army men coming to the door and the fiance just knowing before they even knocked, she saw them through the window and just, that's it. That's the end of your life. She put flowers on his grave every anniversary of his death, every birthday, every Memorial Day until the day she died. She did that. Even when she remarried and had a whole different life, she never stopped. I don't know her name. I can't look her up. Can't look her family up. I don't know what became of her. I'm assuming hopefully she had a life beyond. I think I remember my grandma telling me that she did remarry but she never stopped. It was always brought up because we always asked well, what happened to her? He was 22. They were high school sweethearts, so she was 22 at least. Yeah, so it's just I thought it was really cool that I was able to find this article. So, well, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
So I'd have to say my final thoughts for the viewers would be that I know we all cherish the days we get off. We all get stuck in our mundane routines of things and just see it as cool, a 3-day weekend. I think that we should all start analyzing and actually understanding what it is that they are giving us off for and try to honor what it is, due to the fact that you never know how deep your ties actually go into those holidays. Who knows? Your families out there could have a huge part of Memorial Day that you will never know unless you actually ask.
Honor your dad.
And that said, never stop asking yourself, who are you?